Somewhere in a military archive sits a cassette tape you can still listen to today. On it, you can hear a group of Air Force officers breathing in the cold, their boots cracking frozen ground, and their voices slowly falling apart as they describe a light in the trees that should not be moving the way it moves. The man holding that recorder was a decorated commander who walked into the forest to disprove the whole thing. By the time this is over, you'll hear what changed his mind, and the one line he later put in writing that people still cannot explain. His name was Charles Halt, and this was no hobbyist with a camcorder. Halt was the deputy commander of the twin American air bases at Bentwaters and Woodbridge, run by the U.S. Air Force. At the height of the Cold War, a career officer, a Vietnam veteran, the kind of man whose entire job was cold judgment when everyone else panicked. The bases sat on the edge of Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, near a place where, by persistent rumor, American nuclear weapons were stored. Hold that detail in the back of your mind. Why would a man like that stake his rank on the word UFO? Rewind 2 nights to the early hours of December 26th. Around 3 in the morning, security patrolmen near the east gate of Woodbridge saw lights dropping down into the trees. Their first thought was the reasonable one. A plane had gone down. Aircraft crashed sometimes. So a small team was waved through the gate and sent into the Black Forest to find the wreckage and the survivors. They never found either. What they found instead, by their own account, was a light moving through the pines that obeyed none of the rules. It didn't burn, it didn't roar, it drifted. Out on a nearby farm, the animals lost their minds in the dark, cattle slamming around their pens for no reason anyone could see. And every time the airmen edged closer, the glow seemed to slip backward between the trunks, never running, never gone. Always holding the exact same distance as if it were measuring them. At the center of that first night was Sergeant Jim Penniston, a security supervisor with a spotless record, and what he described went far past a light in the woods. He said he walked right up to a solid craft sitting in a clearing, metallic, triangular, maybe the size of a small tank, resting silent on the forest floor. The air around it crackled. The surface felt strangely warm to the touch. And the whole thing was wrong in a way his training had no page for. On the hull, Penniston said, there were symbols, raised markings, like carvings, unlike any language he knew. He claims he pressed his hand against them. And then, in his telling, the craft rose up, threaded back through the trees, without touching a single branch, shot into the sky, and was gone. Now, that's one man's memory, and memory is a slippery thing. But here's why investigators couldn't just wave it away. The next morning, they went back in daylight, and the forest floor was marked. 3 impressions sat in the frozen ground in a near-perfect triangle, each about 7 inches wide and 1.5 inches deep. Nearby, branches were snapped and bark was scorched on the sides of trees facing the clearing. This is where the story stopped being campfire talk and started generating paperwork, because a triangle pressed into the earth is something you can photograph, measure, and file. And that's exactly what someone on that base decided to do, which is where our deputy commander walks back into the picture. But here's where it gets really interesting. This forest wasn't empty countryside, it sat between 2 of the most sensitive American installations in Europe. During the Cold War, Bentwaters and Woodbridge were frontline NATO bases, aircraft on alert, and, again by long-standing rumor never fully confirmed, a storage site for nuclear weapons. So whatever was flashing through those trees wasn't hovering over a random field, it was hovering over one of the most guarded pieces of ground on the continent. That is not a comforting coincidence. Word climbed the chain of command, and 2 nights after the first sighting, on December 28th, the lights came back. This time, the officer who went out to face them wasn't a nervous young airman. It was Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt himself, the deputy base commander, leading a team into Rendlesham Forest at night to prove, once and for all, that a boring explanation was waiting out there in the dark. He brought a radiation meter. He brought a tape recorder. He did not find boring. Halt's plan was simple. Walk to the landing site, take measurements, debunk the whole thing, Go home." So they hiked in under the pines with flashlights, and Halt narrated everything onto a handheld cassette as they went, a recording that survives to this day. You can actually hear it. The officers breathing, the crunch of frozen ground, the confusion building in their voices. It starts calm and professional. It does not stay that way. At the impression site, Halt ran his meter over the 3 depressions. The needle climbed. The readings peaked right at the marks and near the center of the triangle, higher than the background around them, with the nearest tree reading warm on the side that faced the clearing. On the tape, you can hear him note it. It's a small thing, a few clicks on a meter, but it meant the ground where a solid craft had supposedly sat was measurably different from the forest around it. And then, while they were standing there, someone looked up. Through the trees, off toward the coast, a red light was pulsing. It moved. It seemed to throw off glowing particles, and then, in Halt's own words on the tape, it appeared to break into several separate white objects and vanish. These were not teenagers. This was a full colonel and a security team, and you can hear the tone shift from "let's document this" to something closer to disbelief, and it wasn't done. Almost at once, they spotted 3 more star-like objects in the sky, 2 to the north, 1 to the south, all sitting about 10 degrees above the horizon. Through a lens, they looked elliptical, then snapped into full circles. They moved in sharp, angular jumps and flashed red, green, and blue. The 2 northern lights hung there for an hour. The one to the south stayed for 2 or 3 hours, and every so often, Halt says, it beamed a stream of light straight down toward the ground. Think about what that means for a second. A beam of light, lowered from a hovering object onto a forest that sits beside a suspected nuclear weapons store. Whatever you believe was actually up there, that's what a decorated Air Force officer described out loud in the moment on a tape he knew others might one day hear. He wasn't spinning a story for a documentary. He was a commander trying to make sense of something that flatly refused to make sense. When it was over, Halt had a choice, and it wasn't an easy one. He could file the whole night under weird stuff, best forgotten, protect his career, and move on. Officers who chase UFOs do not get promoted. Or he could write it all down, sign his name and his rank to it, and hand it to the government. On the 13th of January, 1981, he chose the second option. He typed a 1-page memo, and he gave it a title that gave nothing away: Unexplained Lights. In cold, clipped military language, that memo laid out the whole thing. The glowing object, metallic and triangular, 2 to 3 meters across. The pulsing red light on top, the bank of blue lights underneath. The way it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared as the men approached. The 3 depressions, the radiation readings, the star-like objects throwing colored light across the sky. No hype, no aliens, just a base commander reporting, point by point, exactly what his people had seen and quietly staking his reputation on every line. And then the memo did something Halt never intended. It disappeared into a filing cabinet and stayed buried for nearly 3 years. When it was finally pried loose through a Freedom of Information request in 1983, it did not land quietly. It hit newspapers around the world, a real, signed, official U.S. military document describing a UFO over a NATO base. Britain suddenly had its own Roswell, and that is not even the strangest thing to come out of that forest. Decades later, Sergeant Penniston added a detail that split the whole case wide open. He said that when he touched those symbols on the craft, a stream of ones and zeros flooded into his mind, and that once he was home, he couldn't stop writing them down. 16 pages of binary code. Years later, people ran that code and claimed it decoded into words and map coordinates pointing to ancient sites around the world. Believe that or not, and plenty don't, it turned a light in the woods into something far larger. Now, the skeptics have their answers, and they're not stupid ones. 5 miles from that forest stands the Orford Ness Lighthouse, and its beam sweeps across exactly the line the men were staring down, flashing every few seconds, the same rhythm as that pulsing light. That same night, a bright fireball meteor crossed southern England. The triangle in the ground, one local forester said, was just rabbit diggings. Point by point, there's a mundane explanation on offer for almost everything they saw. But here's the thing that keeps this story alive after more than 40 years. The men who were there have never taken it back. Charles Halt didn't recant when it could have saved his career, and he hasn't recanted since. Decades on, retired, with nothing left to protect, he has said flatly that what he saw was not a lighthouse, not a meteor, not stars, that it was intelligently controlled, and that he believes it took an interest in that weapons storage area. The witnesses didn't cash out, they dug in. So why did a base commander log a UFO over England in 1980? Remember that memo I promised you? Buried in its careful bureaucratic paragraphs is one sentence that separates it from every blurry photo and every campfire tale. After describing lights that should not exist, Halt wrote, "Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities. The undersigned, that's him. A serving U.S. Light Air Force officer, by his rank and his signature, telling his own government, I was there and I saw it too." That sentence has never been withdrawn, and no one has ever fully explained what he saw. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button. See you in the next video.